Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 18 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel and you get any use out of today's video, please smash that like button, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So just as a final reminder, the deadline is Thursday for Game Week 18, and as a result, all of the videos are slightly messed up in their ordering, but also we're not going to get a lot of the press conferences before the deadline, because most press conferences take place on a Friday, and they will still do that because most of the games are still this weekend. It will be a little bit difficult to know about different pieces of injury news, and maybe also rotation hints that we might get from managers from the press conferences. So it'll be a little bit more difficult than usual, and therefore the deadline decisions video isn't really going through press conference updates like it usually is. It's more so just answering some of your key questions about the upcoming deadline. And one of the first things I wanted to discuss was the Newcastle defence, and specifically Lascelles and Livramento. Obviously, Botman and Burn were both out for quite a long time, and as a result, a lot of people jumped on Lascelles and Livramento, and they probably got a lot of points from them. But now both Botman and Burn are back. People want to know, is it time to potentially sell the two of them, and am I expecting them to start in Game Week 18? I should just note, I'm not a Newcastle fan. This is all just my interpretation of what's happened recently. I watch a lot of football and I obviously read a lot around football too, but this is just my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me down below in the comments. So what I've tried to list here is Newcastle's best defence when everyone's fit. And then for Game Week 18, because Fabian Schär is a doubt, I've gone through what happens if Fabian Schär is out and Botman starts, because he got 45 minutes against Chelsea, which was apparently a planned 45. So he's probably fit enough to start now. And then I've gone through what happens in Game Week 18 if Fabian Schär is out and Botman is benched. I should note, if Fabian Schär is fit, I do think it will be that top defence. I think that Botman, Schär and Trippier are almost 100% nailed when they are all fully fit. I think the three of them will play pretty much every game available for Newcastle. And then that left-back spot, I do think that Dan Burn is still just about the favoured left-back, simply because he makes them defensively more solid. That being said, Livramento has been fantastic in the absence of Dan Burn, and therefore I would say that I'm not definite that Burn is ahead of Livramento in the pecking order, but that is just my interpretation of it. So I think if Fabian Schär is fit, this will probably be the back four that we see against Luton. And I think Dan Burn will definitely be favoured at left back if possible, simply because Luton have a very tall team and they're very good from set pieces. We actually saw this with Liverpool, if you remember. Tsimikas was benched against Luton away and Gomez played at left back. So I think Burn will be at left back in my opinion. If Fabian Schär is out though, but Botman is fit enough to start, I think the only difference we'll see is that Lascelles will come in for Fabian Schär. So whilst Fabian Schär is out, if he's out at all, then I think it will be Lascelles that starts. I think it will still be Botman at centre-back, and I still think Burn has a good chance of starting at left-back, and then I think Trippier is pretty nailed on at right-back. So that middle defence is what I think will happen if Schär is out and Botman starts. And at the moment, based on the information we have, that is my prediction. I don't think Fabian Schär will be available. I think Botman will start based on the fact that he got 45 against Chelsea. And therefore, I think the back four against Luton at the time of me recording this on Wednesday evening will be Burn, Botman, Lascelles and Trippier. However, if Fabian Schär is out and Botman is benched, i.e. they still don't want to start him or they don't want to risk him in this game, then I think we will see both Livramento and Lascelles start. Because realistically, the only back four I can see happening then is Livramento at left back. Dan Burn will shift into centre back to cover both, obviously, Schär and Botman being out. Lascelles then has to start too. And again, I think Trippier will be at right back. So what this basically means is if Schär is fit for Game Week 18 and Botman is available to start, I do think we could see both Lascelles and Livramento benched, which obviously isn't ideal for a lot of people. What I think is more likely is I think Lascelles will start, because I either think Schär will be out or maybe they won't risk Botman, and then I only think Livramento comes in at left back if both Schär is out and Botman's benched. Hopefully that wasn't overly confusing, but you can see the different combinations on your screen. I think Trippier is almost definitely going to start, and I think he will in most games. I don't know that you need to rush out and sell Livramento this week, and the same with Lascelles, but I would be very surprised if in the coming weeks, unless Schär is out for a very long time, if Lascelles and Livramento don't become sells, because I don't think that either of them are starting in Newcastle's best defence. So I'll leave it there. Let me know down below if you disagree with me. But for this week, I think Lascelles owners might get away with it, but I've got a feeling we could see Livramento on the bench. I don't know why my mind slipped in the previous section, but the percentages, which I should have explained in the Newcastle section, are the percentages, in my opinion, of them starting. So if it's at 100%, that means that in that scenario that I'm discussing, I think there is a 100% chance of them starting. Apologies if that wasn't clear from the previous section, but we are going to stick with defenders now and discuss the Aston Villa defence, because rightly so, a lot of people looking at bringing in an Aston Villa defender for this week, and I think that is a great transfer given their fixtures coming up. Sheffield United in 18, Burnley in game week 20, both at home, and we know how good Villa are, especially at home defensively. So I really like it. But also, a lot of people probably own Matty Cash and maybe even Luca Dean and wondering, do I think they'll get a start? I think the Aston Villa defence is even more complicated than the Newcastle defence, simply because we've got players that can play in a lot of different positions. And I think as a result, it is very, very tricky to try and work out exactly who's going to start in any given game, especially when we have some injury doubts. So what I've done is exactly the same thing here. I've gone through who do I think are the best defenders for them, and then I've gone through for game week 18 if Pau Torres is out, because he is an injured out for game week 18, and I've gone through for game week 18 if Pau Torres is available, what do I think will happen? So I think their best defense in any given week, if everyone is a fit, maybe minus Tyrone Mings, because obviously he's out long term, and we'll discuss what happens when Tyrone Mings comes back in, but let's say assuming everyone's fit outside of Tyrone Mings, I think that is their favoured back four of Moreno, Pau Torres, Diego Carlos, and Ezri Konsa. I think, as you can see here, Moreno for me is the least nailed of that back four, simply because in his absence, Luca Dean has been brilliant. I think he's been one of Villa's best players this season, super reliable. Going forward, we know how good he is, but defensively, he's been much, much better this season. And I don't think it's as simple as saying, well, now Moreno's back, Luca Dean doesn't play a single minute anymore. So I actually think there's a good chance, as we'll discuss in a second, that Luca Dean does start in 18. But I also just think going forward as well, I don't see Moreno playing every single game. I think there is a chance that Luca Dean gets the odd one. I still think Moreno's first choice, but it might be enough to put me off bringing him in. Pau Torres, when fit, as you can see here, 100%, he's the most nailed player for them, and that's why I brought him in last week. So when everyone is fit, the only one I feel 100% sure that plays every single game is Pau Torres. Konsa is almost as nailed. I've put him at 95 because I think he's just slightly less nailed than Pau Torres, but I think they are both probably the two most nailed players, and if you are looking to bring in a defender that you can rely on every week, I think Pau Torres and Konsa are the two. Carlos has been very, very nailed, especially obviously with Mings being out. And I think he plays most games, but there is the possibility at all points for Konsa to tuck in at centre-back and then Matty Cash to go in at right-back. So Carlos for me isn't quite as nailed as Konsa. Maybe slightly harsh to put him at 80% chance of starting all the time, but maybe bump him up to 85, 90%. But I just still feel like it's probably worth going for the safety of Pau Torres and Konsa. So that's the situation if everyone is fit. However, as we've seen, Pau Torres does have a flag. And on the day of me recording this on Wednesday, training pictures have been released for Wednesday's training session with Aston Villa. And unfortunately, Pau Torres wasn't pictured in training, along with Tielemans and Bailey. So the three of them weren't pictured in training, and all three of them have been doubts with injuries. I don't know if that means that maybe he was taking part in his own training, and maybe he will be back in full training on Thursday. Maybe he just wasn't pictured. There were a few other players that as far as we know, are fit that also weren't pictured in training. So this doesn't mean that Pau Torres is definitely out, but if we do go on the basis that Pau Torres is out for game week 18, I think three of the defenders are relatively locked in. I think Carlos and Konsa have to start. Now, if you'd have asked me a few weeks ago, I think Longley could have fit in there, but there are all issues associated with him, if he's going to stay at Aston Villa, if he may leave. So it doesn't look like Longley, and he hasn't actually played a minute in the Premier League this season. So I think it has to be Carlos going straight over to the left centre-back position. I think Konsa will slot in to the right centre-back position, and then that opens up right-back. And at the moment, the only player I can see playing there is Matty Cash. So if Pau Torres is out, Konsa goes from 95% now to 100% now. And I think that means that Matty Cash also starts. So if you've got Cash, and we get confirmation that Pau is out, I think Cash is very, very likely to play. And I should note at this point, we should get a press conference from Unai Emery on Thursday, because Aston Villa play on Friday. So we should actually get an Unai Emery press conference before the deadline. And I think we'll get, hopefully, a definitive update around Pau Torres. But I would probably keep Matty Cash on that basis. And I'll discuss in a second, even if Torres isn't out, I would still be tempted to keep Matty Cash. But I think those three would be relatively nailed. For left back, I've got no idea. And it's not just me. I've spoken to 3 separate Villa fans now, and no one has an idea who's going to start in Game Week 18. Even FPL Villain, who is the best account to follow for Villa news, has literally said, please stop asking me. I've got no idea who starts between Luke Dean and Moreno. Moreno was exceptionally good, and he always is when he plays. But he was really, really good in Game Week 17. But I don't think people realise how good Luke Dean's been this year. If you've been watching Villa, you will know. He deserves to continue getting minutes. And I just think with Moreno just coming back from injury, with the fact that the only reason Luke Dean didn't start, as far as we know, is because he was suspended, I think there is a good chance that he does play on Friday in Game Week 18. So at the moment, I would go like 51% Luke Dean, 49% Moreno. And I think it's pretty much a coin toss. I wouldn't move for Moreno yet as a result until we get a little bit more clarity on definitely whether Moreno is first choice, but how many minutes Luke Dean will get. So for me, at the moment, I would predict it to be that way for left back. But I think Carlos, Konsa and Cash would be basically nailed if that's the situation. If Pau Torres is available, and not only available, but we know he's definitely fit to start, Pau Torres will be 100% nailed, as he always is when he's available. And I think Konsa still remains at that 95%, and he's most likely playing right back. And I think Carlos will probably play in centre back as well. So Pau, Carlos and Konsa, I would expect to start. And I still think, again, it's a coin toss for that left back position. I've just said here, though, even if Pau Torres is fit, and even if it is Konsa that starts at right back, Bailey also wasn't pictured in training. And Bailey basically plays like a right mid position for Aston Villa. But we've seen in recent weeks, as recent as Game Week 17, Matty Cash can also play that right mid position for Aston Villa. So even if the back line is Dean, Moreno, one of those at left back, Pau Torres, Carlos and Konsa, that doesn't mean that Cash can't also start in a more advanced position. So I'll leave it there. Basically, the best long-term pick is Pau Torres, but only when he's available. If not, I'd feel perfectly safe going for Ezri Konsa. I think Carlos is slightly less nailed, so I would be slightly less interested. At left back, I think there's too much competition to decide at the moment. If I was on a free hit, I would definitely risk it going for Luke Dean or Moreno. But outside of that, I'm not sure it's worth the risk bringing in one of them at the moment. And then even if Torres is fit, I wouldn't rule out a start for Cash, but I think it makes it significantly less likely. I would think he's even more likely to start if Torres is out. So final thing around the defence before we move on and discuss some other things for Game Week 18. Lots of people wondering about taking hits or even using their valuable 1 free transfer to sort out their defence. So I've got questions such as, is it worth taking a -4 hit to make sure I don't play Tsimikas or Gabriel or Saliba? And would you take a -4 to do Tsimikas to Konsa? And even, I would say, like in my girlfriend's case, she's got Pedro Porro, Gabriel and Saliba, and she's wondering, do I want to play double Arsenal defence against Liverpool? Or should I maybe remove someone like a Gakey on the bench so that I can bench one of my Arsenal defenders? So I don't think this is a straightforward answer, and you are speaking to someone that massively values free transfers. I value a transfer at 4 points, whether it's for free or for a hit. So I always err on the side of caution and tend to say, if possible, I would roll the transfer and make that decision next week, especially if you've got 1 free transfer. Obviously, if you've got 2 free transfers, by all means go ahead because you've got to use one anyway. But if you've got 1 free transfer this week, and maybe you've got like Tsimikas and Gabriel in your defence, or Gabriel and Saliba, I'm not convinced that I wouldn't take a hit to remove another defender to then get a slightly better one this week. And I'm not even convinced I would use my 1 free transfer. The reason I say that is with a defender, let's say that at the moment you've got Gabriel or Tsimikas, and you don't want to play them, and instead you're wondering, should you take out a bench option to bring in Konsa to then play Konsa instead? Let's say that Tsimikas or Gabriel get you 2 points, right? They get their appearance points, they don't lose any points, but they don't keep a clean sheet. Let's say that Konsa comes in and does what you think he will, and he gets you a 6-pointer. If you've taken a -4 hit to bring in Konsa to play instead of Tsimikas, you are at a net 0. You've gained nothing because Tsimikas would have got you 2 minus the 4 points. The Konsa 6-pointer just cancels itself out. So what you need to take a hit to bring in a defender for it to pay off in the week that you do it is you need the player that you would have played instead to definitely blank and ideally get a 1 or a 0. And the defender that you bring in not only to keep a clean sheet, but also to get bonus points and or an attacking return. And whilst that is possible in any given week, it's pretty difficult to try and predict. And would you have predicted Manchester United to keep a clean sheet against Liverpool? No. Would you predict that Aston Villa will keep a clean sheet against Sheffield United? Yes, but will that definitely happen? Who knows? I think it's very, very difficult at the moment to predict when clean sheets will occur. And I think especially the Arsenal and the Liverpool defenders, I know they're playing against each other, and we probably predict there to be goals in that game. But you just never know in those big games. And they are 2 of the best defences in the league, especially the Arsenal defenders. So especially for a hit, I personally would say no, unless you are taking out a player that isn't going to play because they are injured or suspended, and you have no bench options. I would always advise probably not. Unless sometimes if it's like for a Pedro Porro against Sheffield United at home, it's different because he has so much upside. But usually I don't like it. When we go back to the 1 free transfer, what I always think is, what are the chances of things going wrong that you could need 2 transfers next week? And at the moment, it feels very likely. We've got lots of players on 4 yellow cards. You've got Hwang, Palmer, other players throughout your team that are on 4 yellows. If they both pick up a yellow card in this game week, you go into next game week and you're thinking, hang on a second, I wish I had 2 free transfers. So it's a little bit conservative and it's a little bit boring, but the way I always play is if I've got 1 free transfer and I don't see a very obvious high upside move in that week that I want to make, I tend to prefer rolling next week, so that next week, yeah, you may still decide to make a defensive transfer, but you also have the option of not doing that if there are other issues in your team. So that's my opinion on it, especially with defensive transfers when the upside is very low. I would normally avoid it wherever possible. With attackers, I'm much more likely to go for it because if you're bringing an attacker with a great fixture and taking out another attacker with a poor fixture, the upside feels a little bit higher. Let me know down below if you're making a defensive transfer this week. Let me know if you're taking a hit. In my opinion, it's not for me. I'm not sure I've ever seen so much hype around a player that is yet to play a minute in the Premier League, but here we are with Christopher Nkunku. But it makes a lot of sense because at the start of the season, we were very excited by him. He's been brilliant in recent years in the Bundesliga. His data is very, very good. We thought he'd be on pens, and we thought Chelsea would play very exciting football under Pochettino. Not all of that has panned out the way we thought it would, but I do understand the hype around him because he looks like a very promising asset for FPL. And also, there are a real lack of forward options at the moment. I would love to take out Darwin out of my team right now, but I'm looking at all of the options. I'm like, none of them particularly appeal to me. So I do get it. But some of the questions I've received are, after Nkunku got minutes against Newcastle, so yes, he's not played in the Premier League yet, but he did get minutes on Tuesday evening. Are we expecting him to start in Game Week 18? And then the other question is, would you take a punt on Darwin to Nkunku for Game Week 18? I'm going to sit on the fence, which is very, very annoying, I know, as a content creator, and say that I don't know. And I think there is a chance he starts and there's a chance he doesn't. If he'd have got no minutes against Newcastle, I would have been very worried. I would have said absolutely don't. But the fact that he did, and also the fact that Chelsea are struggling a little bit at the moment, and that he looked pretty sharp when he came on, I wouldn't be surprised to see him start. I think he's very close to a start. So I think if he doesn't start in 18, he probably starts in 19. And minutes off the bench against Wolves, is that a terrible option in comparison to Darwin, even if he starts against Arsenal? I'm not convinced it's too bad. So do you know what? Normally I would advise not. Normally I would say wait till he gets to start, wait till his minutes look a bit more secure, and then move for Nkunku. But when I look at the lack of enticing options in the forward spots, I would say, do you know what? Maybe go for it. Let's see if we get any more predictions from accounts that know a little bit more than I do across Wednesday and Thursday before the deadline as to whether they think Nkunku will start. But if we get some people predicting him to start and you're willing to take the risk that he may only get 20 minutes off the bench, I say maybe go for it. And it could even be that Nkunku's on the pitch, maybe Palmer comes off at 85, and Nkunku could even get a last-minute penalty. And he could still be on penalties himself too. So this feels like a very, not risky transfer, but it's a transfer that could go wrong. So I think as long as you own that, and as long as you accept that Nkunku could still not start in the Premier League for another 3 or 4 game weeks, and he could get eased in really slowly, I think it's fine. And as long as you're maybe willing to reverse it if it doesn't look like it's going to pay out. I would just say the only time that I definitely wouldn't do this is if you don't own Watkins. If you're sat there with Darwin and you don't own Watkins, I wouldn't even look at another striker. And I guess Solanke is probably, on paper, a better option than Nkunku too. So I would definitely have Solanke ahead of Nkunku. Probably have definitely have Watkins. Probably have Solanke ahead of Nkunku. And then maybe there are some other options like a Jesus you could go for instead. But I do understand the lack of alternatives. And for me, I don't mind it as a punt. I would love to know down below, is anyone considering him? I'm a little bit too conservative and boring for this, I think. I think for me, I do want to see him get one start. I want to see him look good. Maybe the data be okay, but mainly look fit. And then after he gets that start, maybe that's the time I'll move to him. So I'm probably eyeing up around game week 19 or 20. Maybe once Salah and Son go off to their respective tournaments. Maybe when I shift around the budget a little bit, I might be able to squeeze an Nkunku in. So I thought I would just give you an update on the Haaland situation. Not that we have anything definitive at the moment, but throughout the weeks I will be updating you every time we get something. And we've had 2 interesting things happen today. Firstly, Manchester City France, so the French Twitter account for Manchester City, tweeted 2 pictures of Erling Haaland quite clearly with the club. Well, it looks like anyway, based on the weather and the surroundings, with the club at the club Club World Cup finals and looks like he is in some form of training. Now, there is no one around him. And we then had it confirmed by Pep Guardiola that Erling Haaland still wasn't in training. He said, no, Erling still cannot train. And what he means by that is Erling Haaland isn't with the team training. And since then, we've had team training photos. And Kevin De Bruyne is back in full team training. But Erling Haaland definitely isn't pictured there. So I don't think Pep is lying. I don't think Pep is playing mind games here. I think what he is saying here is Haaland is not with the team training. Very interesting, though, because after this, and about 2 or 3 hours after it was posted, Manchester City France deleted their tweet, and the Premier League, or I think it was Fantasy Premier League that retweeted it, also deleted their tweet. So it was quite interesting that this picture went up and then everyone deleted it. I wonder if they weren't supposed to post this. Now, I don't know if they weren't supposed to post it because they were trying to hide that Haaland is very, very close to full fitness, or whether it was supposed to go live at a later date. I don't really know the reasoning, but we're all left a bit confused. What we currently know, though, is Haaland still isn't in team training, and Haaland will not be playing a part with the team for the Club World Cup finals. Therefore, I still think there is a very good chance that he doesn't play against Everton. When it comes to then Game Week 20 against Sheffield United, maybe I'm a little bit less sure now as to whether he'll start that. Because in the previous video, I was like, if he's not training and he's not going to play a part in these finals, then is he even going to be available for Game Week 20? I'm now starting to think he might be back a bit sooner. But I guess the question comes now. Firstly, if you still have Haaland because you didn't sell him last week, do you now still keep him in the hope that he's back for 19 or 20? And also, how are we planning a route back to him? I think this largely depends on your team. If you're looking at your team now and you're happy with your defence and you don't necessarily want Trent or Trippier particularly, your midfield looks good and you've got most of the major options in Salah, Son, Palmer, Saka, maybe a Richarlison in there. And with your forwards, if your two forwards are Solanke and Watkins, and then it's Haaland on the bench, if that is somehow your team in a really good structure, then there's really no need to sell him. I wouldn't move him on. But if you're looking at your team and thinking the midfield needs a bit more money in it, I would quite like a Trent or Trippier, and I don't currently own a Watkins or a Solanke or an Alvarez, and I want to bring them in, then I would still feel pretty comfortable selling. Because, as I've said previously, yes, there is a chance he's back for Everton, but it's looking more and more unlikely by the minute. And on top of that, you're probably not captaining him in 19 anyway. I know there are some doubts around whether Salah will start against Burnley away, because it feels like a decent opportunity to bench Salah. I still think, unless we have a real reason to believe he will be rotated, I think Salah's still the best captaincy option. And there are other captaincy shouts as well. You could even go for a Heung-min Son. So I think you can probably get away with not owning him for 19. So if you still have Haaland, 18 and 19, you've still got 2 weeks where you're pretty okay not having him. And then you do have a route back to him when you sell Son or Salah in Game Week 20. So I would still err on the side of saying, yes, I think you are fine selling Haaland, but don't do it for the sake of it. When it comes back to planning a route back to Haaland, I don't think we need to stress for the time being. I know it may impact your thinking as to whether you should spread the money. If you've got like 6 million sat in the bank, should you go out and buy a Trent or Trippier? My answer would kind of be no. And that isn't just because of the wanting to get Haaland straight back in, although it does help. I just think the fixtures coming up for Trent and Trippier aren't great. And therefore, I don't think their points will be what we've seen from them in previous game weeks. And I do think at some point soon, you are going to want Haaland back in. And yes, you can sell Son and Salah. But as I said in my previous video, you then have the issue of, well, yes, you sell Salah, which allows you to get Haaland. How do you then get Salah back? You're not going to sell Haaland. You're then going to probably have to sell your Trent or Trippier anyway. And so you're probably only going to own Trent or Trippier for 5 or 6 weeks. And the 5 or 6 fixtures that they've got coming up aren't that great. So I would maybe err on the side of saying, no, I don't think I would spread the money, but not just for Haaland, just for thinking in the future that you're then going to also want Son and Salah and probably Saka and maybe a Watkins and maybe a Gabriel Jesus and an Ødegaard and all these quite expensive players. And I don't think you're going to want all that money invested in your defence. But also, in the next 5 weeks, if Trent and Trippier start scoring 30, 40 plus points in those weeks, then it will probably pay back and you'll be happy taking a hit to then remove them. So I'm okay with it either way. I don't really have a definitive update on Haaland. I still think it's unlikely he features in 19 based on what we know. But I guess let's wait and see if we get anything more before the Thursday deadline. But then after that, we've got the Game Week 19 deadline next. So nothing definitive, but I don't think it's looking good for a return very soon. So captaincy for Game Week 18 is very, very interesting. Obviously, Erling Haaland blanks anyway, but he's out. So we don't have Erling Haaland. And Salah has arguably the most difficult fixture you can have on paper. It'll probably be slightly more difficult if it was Arsenal away, although we do know that Arsenal are pretty good away from home defensively. So you've got no Haaland, Salah with a very, very difficult fixture, And then also some of the other options that you might want to choose from don't have the best fixtures. For example, Heung-min Son would then be third in line. I think most people would accept that when everyone's available, Haaland's the best captain, Salah's the second best, and Son's the third best. But Son is coming up against a very, very good Everton team. They are currently in the top 4 for expected goals conceded this season. They are not the same Everton, and we need to wrap our head around that. There are certain teams this season that aren't performing the way that we would think, and we need to start considering them difficult fixtures. And Everton is a difficult fixture. And that doesn't matter whether it's away or at home. They are just defending well across the board. So we are in a very tricky position. And then it comes down to, well, you've got Ollie Watkins sat there against Sheffield United at home. Is it a no-brainer? It kind of is, but there are 2 things that I don't like about Ollie Watkins. And because there is so much to like, right? Let me start with the stuff I like. Great data, pretty good data. He's nailed to play pretty much 90 minutes in any game. And the only time he would come off early is if they're already 4 or 5 up, in which case you hope he's got some returns as well. And like I said, he has the best fixture in the Premier League this week. So for all of those reasons, he's fantastic. And he's in a good run of form. He's performing well himself. And the output is there to show for him. And again, on top of that, Aston Villa are great at home. So there are all of these positives that we have around him. There are 2 things I don't like. Firstly, I don't like the fact that he's not on penalties. And I know that's not a big thing. And Ollie Watkins has shown himself that you don't need penalties to haul. And loads of players show that as well. We have seen Son, without penalties in the past, deliver massive hauls. Raheem Sterling has shown in the past that he can deliver without penalties. So you don't need penalties. But when I'm picking who I want to captain, I want the most possible routes to points. And I want to optimize my chances in any given week of getting a big score. And having no penalties does reduce his chance of a big haul slightly. So I always feel a little bit uneasy captaining someone that's not on pens. You'll see him pretty much every week. In fact, I think in every week this season, I've captained a penalty taker. And it's why we like Haaland, Salah, and Son, because all 3 are on penalties. The second thing that I don't like about Watkins, and you're probably going to disagree and laugh when I say this based on some of the scores that he's got this season, I don't think he's a particularly explosive option. I think he is great to keep in your team and he will tick along every week, but I think he is significantly less likely than the likes of Son, Salah, and Haaland to haul. The first reason for that is he's not a midfielder, and I know Haaland disproves this theory, but for the most part, it's a lot easier for a midfielder to haul. Extra point for a clean sheet, and extra point for every goal they score. So if Salah gets a brace and a clean sheet, he immediately gets 3 more points than Watkins, right? He gets a 16-pointer versus a 13-pointer. So I feel like it's very, very difficult for a forward to haul. The other thing is, Watkins gets good data every game. Like, he tends to sit around a 0.5 to 0.6 expected goal involvement, but he's actually only returned more than once in 3 games this season. And I want to read out the data from those 3 games to show you that it's due to his good finishing from his teammates as well, and maybe a small portion of luck. Remember the 23-pointer he got against Brighton? That was 5 attacking returns. He actually only accumulated a 0.98 expected goal involvement in that game. So based on the data, and I know some people don't like data, but I do, so I will report it, he was expected to get approximately 1 attacking return, and he got 5. So he outperformed his XGI by 4, which is ridiculous. The next game that he managed to do it was against West Ham. His expected goal involvement was 0.64. So again, expected to get 0.64 returns, and he got 2. Again, massively overperforming it. Then the one that was absolutely ridiculous was the game against Bournemouth. And for those of you that sold him in this game, you can feel very hard done by. He put up 0.18 expected goal involvement. His data was really, really poor. 0.14 XG, 0.04 expected assist. And yes, there are games this season when he's done quite well. But I just don't feel like he's got that massive monster scoring him on a consistent basis. Whereas Son, Salah, and Haaland have shown that they do. And the data backs it as well. In those games when they do haul, they're consistently putting up over 1 XG. The final thing that I will say, because I was looking into the data, and maybe this goes back in the other direction. So I've given you pros and cons for Ollie Watkins. The 2 games this season when he's put up over 1 expected goal involvement. So the 2 games when he has had a hell of a lot of chances, Luton at home and Fulham at home. 2 home games against teams that are very poor away from home, and you would say are traditionally weaker defences. I know Fulham have improved a little bit, but those are the 2 games, 1.4 XGI against Luton, and then 1.99 XGI against Fulham. So he does have it in his locker to have a game where he gets a lot of chances, both of them at home and both against relatively poor defences. Funnily enough, in those games, he got 2 points and 6 points. So hopefully we don't see that again where he puts up loads of data and doesn't return. But I guess I just don't think it's as obvious as saying Watkins is great, playing a poor defence, captain him. I do think there are pros to still going for Son and Salah, being on pens with consistently slightly stronger data and a slightly greater haul potential. You also have the likes of Palmer, who's been performing well recently. You could go for Kieran Trippier if you think Newcastle will keep a clean sheet because he'll be good for bonus points as well. All of that to say, I am on Ollie Watkins at the moment, and I still think he's probably 60% likely to be my captain at the moment, but I just wanted to present some different opinions to you and just say that you could still go for Son and Salah. If Son or Salah had slightly better fixture, I don't know, let's say they played against Fulham away, or even like a Bournemouth away, where it's not a great fixture, but it's slightly better, I would probably be on Son or a Salah instead. But the fact that they're playing against Aston and Everton, who are two of the best defences in the league at the moment, I'm still edging towards Ollie Watkins. So just before I finish recording this video, I just checked on Twitter and Bournemouth versus Luton has been decided and the game has been, as we thought, voided and therefore the points have been voided as well. So the official announcement from Fantasy Premier League is following the announcement that Bournemouth and Luton will be replayed in full at a later date, Game Week 17 will now be closed and the game will update shortly. Points achieved by players in the original fixture will be voided. Normal auto subs and vice captain rules apply. So just to confirm, if you had points from a Solanke in your 11, he will now score 0, and whoever your first sub is will come in for Solanke. Unless your first sub has already come in, then it will be your second sub. That is very, very harsh for Solanke owners. I think Solanke was the only real player that returned in that game. I think the likes of Tavernier and all of the other players that you might have had, Senesi, were only on like 1 or 2 points. So maybe you're not overly bothered about that. And if you're sat there with like a Dan Burn on your bench, maybe you're delighted. I'm not going to talk about too much whether I think this is the right or wrong thing to do. I can explain the reasoning that this has happened. The fact that the game has been abandoned and has now been confirmed to be played at a later date means that according to Opta, according to the Premier League records, this game never happened, right? It's been abandoned, which means that it would be strange, I suppose, to keep a Solanke goal on the FPL records when that doesn't exist on the Premier League and Opta records. And I know you might go, well, sometimes Fantasy Premier League give assists that aren't on the Opta records, and that is true. But I feel like that's almost like a precedent, and that's within the rules. This is a situation where this game, according to any other history book and Opta and any kind of, statistics website, this game won't exist. So I think it is I say this as a non-Solanke owner, but I think it is the correct decision for this game to be voided. Also, it would have caused other issues with the fact that, for example, Solanke would have played technically 39 games rather than 38. And then he would have had 39 chances for points. So it sucks if you are a Solanke owner, and especially if you don't have someone decent coming off the bench. But at this stage, there is nothing you can do. FPL have made their decision. It's based on what's happened in the Premier League. It's one of those things we have to accept, and then we move forward from here. It does mean that both Bournemouth and Luton will have a double game week at some point. When we have more information about when that will be, I'll let you know. It could be coming up soon, I suppose. And for that double game week, considering one of the games will be against Luton at home, I will bring in Solanke for that week, and I'll probably captain him. So if there is a chance that this game is replayed soon, it may be that my transfer in this week now becomes Solanke just because that double game week is happening. So I'll leave that there. Let me know what you think down below of the Bournemouth versus Luton game, but at least we have an answer now. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 18 deadline decisions video. Hopefully this was useful for you, and if it was, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. I am trying to hit 110,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I would really, really appreciate the support. And finally, make sure you tune into tomorrow's deadline stream, Thursday at 6:30 p.m. or 4:30 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the 6:30 p.m. deadline. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.